All right, here we go. Take two. So hey everybody, my name is Gabi Kinney. I'm the Community Engagement Project Manager at Wetlands Watch. We are a nonprofit organization focused on sea level rise and flooding and the kind of broader umbrella of climate adaptation. I have a background in environmental education, and I am so lucky to work in this kind of community science space and on this project we call Catch the King. As we're talking, it would also be really cool if anybody could drop in the chat whether or not they've participated in Catch the King before, if this is your first time. That would be a really cool thing to know as well. So let's dive right in. So what is Catch the King? Everything kind of started when Wetlands Watch developed the Sea Level Rise app all the way back in 2014. This came after Hurricane Sandy, and if anybody has been in this location or a coastal area during a hurricane, you may notice that the community kind of rallies together over disasters like this in terms of getting neighbors help and helping people find safety, getting them resources. If you have a Facebook, sometimes those Facebook groups pop up out of nowhere trying to get people what they need. And so we see the community really coming out to help each other in a time of need. And with sea level rise and flooding, especially in our locations, we're noticing that it's causing a lot of issue at that local level. And we're kind of thinking about, why don't we create a tool that not only helps people help each other, but we're actually going to collect real usable data with this program as well. And so we launched the app in 2014 to allow people to start collecting data around this. And we started thinking, not only do we need the tool, but it might be a great idea to hold kind of a public-facing event to spread the awareness around sea level rise and flooding and kind of this increasing issue in our areas. So we worked with a local reporter. He's actually on the call today. He has since retired, but Mr. Dave Mayfield worked with the Virginian pilot at the time and worked with us at Wetlands Watch to kind of devise this wonderful awareness building event called Catch the King. And I'll go into a little bit later why we call it Catch the King. There's a little bit of kind of title science behind it if you haven't heard of king tides before, but we'll show a chart a little bit later to show what that means. In 2017, we actually broke a Guinness World Record for this event, which is pretty darn awesome. The official title was Most Contributions to an Environmental Survey. Over 700 people participated, thousands and thousands of pins were dropped. And the pandemic had since kind of knocked us back a little bit. We didn't really have those public engagement events for a few years there in between. And I came on board Wetlands Watch a little bit later to actually reinvigorate the program and see what we could do with Catch the King again. So this is year 2 of our kind of relaunch of the program. And I'm just so thankful that everybody's on the call here interested in it today. All of the mapping that we do currently contributes to flood modeling and sea level rise prediction at the Virginia Institute of Marine Science. Again, Dr. Derek Loftis will come on a little bit later to talk about where that data goes and how it's useful. And the other kind of what I think is a really important piece is this is a really public awareness building event. Not only do we have volunteers who are participating in the very real data collection that's being used, but it's also a chance for us to kind of spread the word, talk to people about sea level rise, what those predictions are looking like in the future, help bring awareness to those flood locations at the local level, and really just kind of make it a nice community-based risk awareness event. It's also very easy to start feeling very anxious about climate change and all of the predictions and reports that are coming out about what our world is going to look like in the next few decades. And community science programs are a really great way to get folks involved and help them kind of feel like part of the solution. And so I also like to say that this program helps you feel that way as well. We have organized teams and data collection all over coastal Virginia, but we also this year received funding from NOAA to expand this program into North Carolina. So we've kind of had a very casual relationship with some folks who are doing tide monitoring work down in North Carolina. We've put on a few king tide events down there and are working with them to get the Sea Level Rise app integrated. This event is also really about addressing barriers at the local level. You may live in a city that has signs that say, don't park here except during a flood. If you take a step back and really think about that, I honestly think it's kind of crazy that cities have incorporated this flood language into that local level, because that's how we adapt and that's how we're working to address this space. We already know that parking can be a crazy nightmare in general in some of our overpopulated cities. And so when you throw flooding into the mix with something like this, it can be a real issue. And so collecting data at this level is really, really important, especially when our local governments don't have capacity to come out and find every flood location themselves. So this program can really help be a gap filler. The other things that we can do, and this is a screenshot directly from the Sea Level Rise app, we can actually document how people are interacting with these floodwaters. So not only are we collecting the GPS data around it, but we're also capturing the satellite imagery in areas that are most frequently inundated, and they're inundated enough for those Google Maps to capture people interacting with floodwaters, like driving through it. I always like to throw a caveat out there. If you have a car, we highly recommend do not driving through floodwaters. You have no idea how deep it is, what could be in that floodwater, and saltwater can really wreck your car. So I like to throw that little word of the wise in there. So back to why we call it Catch the King. So if you haven't heard of a king tide before, these king tides happen twice a year. There's a season in the spring and in the fall, when the new or full moon's orbit is closest to Earth. And because of that, the gravitational pull from the moon pulls those tides higher inland than they would during the rest of the year. And so this is kind of showing that ellipse. You can see on this kind of portion of the ellipse, this new moon is closest to Earth. Again, that gravitational pull is really pulling those waters up and inland, and same thing for the fall. We study these king tides because with all of the future projections of sea level rise and its increase, we can use the king tide data of today to kind of get a vision into what this normal high tide daily flooding can look like in the future. So you may hear us talk about things like sunny day flooding or nuisance flooding. It's when you walk right outside of your house and there is flooding just in the street, in your community, on your route to work. And so we're studying king tides of today because that may become our typical everyday sunny day high tide flooding of the future. So the more data we collect today, the better of a view we have into the future. For some of you who live in the Hampton Roads area, you may know of locations like this. This is Colonial Place. And this is not a natural shoreline. This community was backfilled. So this is not, at the time, this was not the natural kind of edge of that shoreline. And at the time, we don't account for what sea level rise is going to do because we may not know that it's going to be such an issue decades later. And these are houses where the water literally comes up to people's front doors. So not only do we have to think about what the water is doing on our streets and in our community, but also things like how our kids get to school. Some of these kids live right on this street, and you have to think in the morning, do I need to prep my kid, throw some muck boots on them, and make sure they get safely around the floodwaters to get on the bus? And so flooding is becoming just a hugely, hugely problematic phenomenon in our areas, and all the more data we can collect on it, the better. We're also concerned with things that the floodwaters pick up in the streets, and we have a program that we partner with that I'll talk about in a second that's actually collecting water quality data on these issues. So things like dog poop and trash and litter and all of these things that the street kind of holds in a residential community, those floodwaters that come into the streets can actually carry all of that stuff back out into the Chesapeake Bay, back out into the coast, into our inlets and estuaries, and be a real issue for the water quality front as well. So documenting where this flooding is happening, as well as what might be going into the waters, is a huge component of Catch the King, and why we really want to study this at the locality level. Things like stormwater infrastructure as well. If there are storm drains that aren't maintained, and floodwaters from the coast can bubble up through stormwater drains as well. That's something that we're paying attention to. Again, those parking lots, you'll probably see lots of pictures of parking lots coming out of Catch the King. These seem to really like to pool water. And then not only are we concerned about the tidal flooding and kind of this natural cycle of high tides, but if you combine a king tide event with a hurricane or a rainfall event, we're seeing these really devastating torrential water levels at the street level. And again, you can see in the foreground, this is a huge trash can up here with a school bus in the background. So kind of a combination of risk in that picture. So this brings us to talk about the actual tool that we're going to use. So this is the Sea Level Rise app. This is a screenshot from our main tool tab inside of it, and we'll go over all of that a little bit later. And as you use the Sea Level Rise app, we ask that you drop a GPS pin. And again, we'll kind of walk through step by step how this happens in a little bit. Each one of those pins that you drop correlates to a specific GPS coordinate. And this GPS coordinate goes, I think, like 10 to 15 decimals out. So it's highly, highly specific. And every single one that you drop, again, correlates to that GPS signal. So we get this really nice delineation. In some cases, you're working on a coastline, so it's just a line on how high that water is coming in. In other cases, we can get really nice shape files and actually show the full extent. So if you're in a parking lot, you can see the whole circle of the flooding and how far it's coming inland. This is a screenshot from the data viewer that Derek is going to talk about a little bit later. This is all of our Catch the King data since 2017 on the Tide Watch viewer, which is a daily high tide flooding prediction model. And so I don't want to spoil anything. I'm going to let him take that away, but just to show you how we're kind of displaying this data year after year. This is a public facing tool. This is something that you can click on, and I'll make sure everybody who's on this call gets a copy of these slides. We've actually linked it right here, and you can click on it and actually go check out all of the pins since 2017, where people have mapped in the past and how that lines up with the FloodWatch model. In Norfolk in particular, I like to highlight this city. This is often one of our most subscribed cities in terms of Catch the King. We're hoping to expand that in every locality. Virginia Beach also does really well, and Northern Neck last year was our top participating region as well. So we get really great participation up and down the coast. But because a lot of folks live in Norfolk, last year we had 22 folks participate, over 2,000 pins were collected. And these are just some of those pictures of what the pins can be dropped. So that first one is a residential community kind of in the heart of the city. This is a boat ramp. And then this is, again, a residential street. So you get this really mixed place-based description of where that flooding is coming in. So we get sort of data collection of all sorts. I'm going to show just a 2-minute little clip of some of our volunteers and how data collection actually functions. So if this doesn't work for y'all, someone throw up a hand and let me know, but I'm hoping it'll work.
What I'm doing here is I'm walking along the outer edge of where the water is and start dropping.
Did the audio pause for you guys for a second?
It did
Okay.
A little bit.
Let me go back. Sorry.
What I'm doing here is I'm walking along the outer edge of where the flooding is. And this is the common flooding of this kind of event. We're looking for a place where we can get to where the water is and start dropping the pin. We decided we want to get involved with the flooding, especially with the hurricanes and so forth. We got an article in the newspaper last year about the king tide. I said to her, this looks like something we could do. And she said, yes, let's do that. So we signed up, we did the training. And last year we started in this exact same area because we live right over there. And as a result, we can map this whole side of Polly Bay all the way to the bridge and give the scientists the data they need.
We had, I think the count was 437 volunteers, people that were very passionate about doing something for the environment. I live on a street that does a significant amount of flooding, and over the past couple of years, just living here, have seen some changes and wanted to kind of think of ways, how can we help, how can we prevent some of the flooding, but also predict it. I thought it was really cool that there's crowdsourcing of all different types of volunteers coming in and giving their time to just take some measurements, collect that data, and then make some predictions and move forward with some ideas from there.
I really do think that people are interested in being part of the solution locally. They're seeing it on a regular basis. Here's something that they can put into action themselves and be part of the solution.
And that's it. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of what our volunteers look like, the different types of scenes that you'll see during a King Tide event. This, I believe many of the footage collected for this video was in Norfolk, Virginia, but these are not unlikely sites in other areas around coastal Virginia. There's that residential street level, but there's also some of these natural buffers that are starting to get over inundated. So that's just to give you a view kind of what folks are doing and what sorts of gear you need as well. Everybody's got those rain boots on, so highly recommend picking up a pair of rain boots if you don't have some already. Another thing I like to bring attention to is that this program is centered in community science, and community science is intended to be science for everybody. It's something that promotes data collection that's accessible to most everybody. In this case, everybody who has a smartphone or a tablet that can download an app. And people of all kinds can come out and participate in this sort of flood mapping. In the top right photo, you'll see, it's probably a little bit hard to see, but we've actually had our youngest mapper of all time. This is a very newborn baby on her mom's chest, and they actually went out last year in 2022 to map flooding right outside their home. So we really see all sorts of participation. Other folks in this picture in the bottom left, there's a group of Girl Scouts. We have master naturalists, master gardeners, student programs, all sorts of wonderful groups who want to get involved in this data collection. One of the, and I mentioned this briefly earlier, one of the programs that we partner with is a program at ODU called Measure the Muck. And this is that water quality piece. So Dr. Margaret Mulholland's students in the oceanography lab at ODU actually go out, and general volunteers. She invites anybody to come participate, and she provides water quality collection kits to everybody who participates. They go to our Catch the King flood locations and take water samples from those floodwaters at the street level, and they actually analyze the nutrient load that comes out of it. The results of that are very, very shocking. We are not doing great on our Chesapeake Bay nutrient load goals. And if you're curious to know what those results look like after this year, we'll do a volunteer appreciation event early in the spring once the holidays are over. And Margie always comes and presents on the data and lets us know how bad we're doing. And so if you're curious to hear more about that, feel free to come to our volunteer appreciation event. The date has not been chosen yet, but it's a great time to learn about all of this data that's really important to bring attention to in terms of king tides. The other project that we've partnered with in the past is ODU's Blue Line project. If you've been out and about during a Catch the King event in the past, you may have seen some ODU students placing these chalk blue lines around the city. And they're actually showing what the sea level rise predictions are coming in 2050, 2080, and I believe they did 2100 too. And they actually draw the line on the streets where those waters, that typical high tide flood water, is going to come in during those time periods. So really kind of public facing, very important events to bring attention to. They're not doing it this year. They're actually going to do some drone footage for us, which are going to bring some really great photos. This bottom right photo is a wonderful, wonderful aerial imagery. If anybody on the call does this sort of work as well, drone and aerial photography, that's something we're looking to collect more of. So feel free to reach out if you're curious in any of that realm. This is where I'm going to invite Derek to come on, but I'm going to double check that he's not on yet. Derek, are you there? Okay, I don't think he's there yet. We'll come back to that. So we'll talk a little bit about how Catch the King is going to work this year. For anybody who's new to the program, the actual data collection is largely self-led. We provide a ton of resources for you in terms of maps, how to find high tide. In certain locations, we have tide captains who are helping organize teams and organize the materials per locality that you can use and reference in terms of when and where you're going to go collect data. But just to put it out there, it is largely self-led. We don't have like a big gigantic meeting place that we all come to and disseminate out. There will be a few locations this year that you can come to and kind of interact with a few of our tide captains and staff who are part of this project. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But just to let you know, it is very self-led and really relying on the resources that we hand out to you guys is the most important part. Oh yes, and we have tide captains in select regions. So we provide maps, and that's something, and all of the websites that I'm going to mention and the resources will be hyperlinked in this presentation. So if you're like, oh my gosh, Gabby, this is a ton of information, I'm never going to remember this, don't worry, you will have a copy of these slides that you can reference later on. There's also some instructions on finding high tide. If anybody has used NOAA's tide prediction station map before, it can be a little daunting at first. And so we've compiled a little instruction list on how to find your high tide cycles. Both in the app and via email, you can collaborate and connect with your teams per region. If you would really like to connect with people and see if anybody wants to be a buddy and go out and collect data with you, we can provide those systems for you. In a few weeks, probably by the end of next week, getting closer to the event, I will have region-specific or locality-specific website pages on the Wetlands Watch page that will kind of list your references per locality. So you'll have your, say you live in Hampton, you'll have your Hampton map, you'll have your Hampton tide prediction site, and you'll have ways to contact your tide captain if there is one there, as well as instructions on how to connect with other volunteers. And again, that is all up for you guys to use and kind of manage your mapping how you would like to go about it. But you can really, if you know where it floods and you know when it's going to flood just off the top of your head, that is perfectly fine too. You can take the sea level rise app out on the same day and just collect data that way. All volunteers will receive swag. There's going to be different ways that we're going to do this year. Last year, I asked for everybody to fill out a form so that I could send out some swag to you. I'm not going to drop it yet. I'm actually going to announce it through our newsletter, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So if you want some Catch the King swag, like hats, t-shirts, maybe, definitely keep your eyes out for that and make sure you're subscribed to the Catch the King newsletter because everybody loves swag. Our official event is October 27th to the 29th. This is a King Tide event. It's one of the last ones of this King Tide season and close to the highest King Tide of the year. The end of September, we had a pretty high one, and this end of October event is very, very similar in the predictions. Over that weekend from Friday to Sunday, our events inside the Sea Level Rise app are open. You can head out any day over that weekend and collect data around the high tide. You can go out on several days if you would like to. We recommend going with a buddy or a team, but if you're on it and you have your boots and your phone app and you're all good to go, you are welcome to go out on your own. But we definitely recommend you head out with a buddy as well. And then again, we'll have a volunteer appreciation event in the new year. We'll talk about all the data we collected. We'll highlight some different data sets. We'll invite some of our other programs that we partner with, like ODU, to talk about some of the data that they collect as well. This year, we're doing some photo contests. So our photo contest winners will be announced and all of that fun stuff. Oops. I double clicked. Hold on.
Harry, you could ride your bike down to our boat, take a picture of our boat with the level, like when it's really high.
I'm pretty sure they have points.
Oh, I got it. Here we go. Sorry, y'all. Make sure you're muted if you are not already. Thank you. So we're going to walk through kind of step by step of what to do from today. And I'm going to do a double check again just to make sure Derek hasn't joined us yet. Yeah, he hasn't. Okay. So one, make sure you are registered. You might think it's kind of wonky to both register for the Sea Level Rise app and the event as a whole. But we want you to register for the event through this website, wetlandswatch.org/catchtheking, so that we can connect you with other folks in your region, and make sure that you have all of the resources that you need. Subscribing to the Catch the King newsletter, I've mentioned it a few times. this is going to be my main mode of communication with everybody. We post things at Wetlands Watch on our social medias, and we have a Facebook group on this as well. But the newsletter is really going to be where you get access to training events. Again, that swag form, feedback forms, and kind of this broader organization that we're trying to pull for Catch the King this year. So if you haven't already, if you go to this registration website, you should see a little subscribe to the CTK newsletter on the right-hand side of the page. So again, if you haven't already, highly recommend this just to make sure you don't miss any important information. We also do have a Facebook group. It's called Help Catch the King Tide. I've linked it here in this newsletter, but you can actually just go search it on Facebook. You should see our little logo pop up when you get there. This is also where I post just kind of more frequent updates. It's also a really great space to chat with other volunteers. It's a place where you can put out a message and say, hey, I'm mapping in this location. Is anybody doing the same thing? And it's a good place to kind of find a buddy up volunteer. Review all of the training materials as well. So our app FAQs page, which is something, did I link it in here? I did not yet. I think it's on another slide, but we have put out tutorial guides for the Sea Level Rise app, as well as a video on everything that we're going to walk through today. You guys kind of get early access to like the step-by-step information, but these tutorial guides and training videos and all of that exist on our website. So if you're part of an organization that's interested in gaining volunteers for this sort of work, you can send them to some of our websites that have those resources on it. We have training events, like I said. These are listed on that app FAQ page as well. So if you're curious in getting some kind of on the ground practice, either with a tide captain or with myself, you can sign up for one of those training events as well. Registering for the Sea Level Rise app is another good step. I mentioned it at the beginning of the call. If you don't have the Sea Level Rise app already, highly recommend downloading it now because we'll go step by step in a few minutes. Joining an official region and event inside the app, and this again will all make sense in a little bit if you haven't done this yet, but we kind of organize the data collection by both location and time period. So we create regions inside the app, as well as events for different tide events, rainfall events, etc. Oops. Here we go. This is what our tutorial guide looks like, and I believe I can go over this now. Give me 1 second. Oops. Okay, I'm going to do an overview of this and then we'll dive back in and maybe see if Derek comes back. So we have, again, this tutorial guide. This walks through step by step how to get into the Sea Level Rise app. And this is what we're going to do together today in a few minutes. We've put lots of screenshots in the app. Oh, and that's actually our outdated one. We'll get the good one in a second. We've also done this as a written version. Some people are more visual photo learners and others are kind of more written step-by-step learners. So we have both of those available. We also have a tutorial video on how to get into the right region and event. And then I believe this shows not only that how-to guide, but also a volunteer fact sheet. So we're sharing this. You may see a flyer floating around that has both program information as well as why this is important, what it means to be a volunteer. And there's another page floating around on if you're interested in being a tide captain and helping us organize teams. You can help us with that too. So those are all the resources available. Again, all of these are hyperlinked and listed on wetlandswatch.org/app FAQs. So the Catch the King website's where you register. App FAQs is where you kind of figure out how to map, how to get into the Sea Level Rise app and all of that fun stuff. Again, we'll have region specific websites available kind of page by page, depending on the locality you're in, for those resources. If anybody's just joining us, could you please mute yourself? There we go. Cool. And for now, you can visit this website and kind of familiarize yourself with a lot of these resources. So you can go into app FAQs, find that tide prediction chart if you've never used it before, and get a feel for what sorts of resources we're using. This is what that NOAA tide prediction map looks like. They have tons and tons of tide prediction sites. These are either tide gauges or USGS stations that are collecting that high tide data on a frequent basis. And this is something also that I've hyperlinked in here. So if anybody isn't sure how to use it, this will open up. And we'll just do a quick little run through of this. And we like to use Sewell's Point as a reference point in the Norfolk area. So you'll come in and you'll kind of find the tide prediction site that's closest to you. You'll click on this and find tide predictions here. And this is an instruction sheet, so you don't have to memorize things now. We have these available for you. And it'll open up to this kind of messy, kind of kooky looking chart. But once you kind of stare at it for a minute, it makes sense. We'll come down here and plug in our Catch the King weekend date, October 27th to the 29th, and we'll go ahead and plot it. And it will change up here. So you'll notice the 27th, which is that Friday, the peak high tide is 3.3 feet at 8:30 in the morning. So you can see if you just hover over that peak tidal cycle, it'll show you when and how high that tide is coming in. So a really great resource if you're not sure how to find high tide timings. Other than that, oh, cool. And I did do a little screenshot. So this is kind of what it looks like. It will also show you another little table on the right-hand side that goes through the timings as well. I've linked the instruction sheet in the slide so you guys can figure that out as well. These are screenshots from our app FAQ page. Again, this is where all of your resources and materials will live. We've linked that composite CTK map that VIMS has created here, so you can see where folks have collected data in the past. It's not a bad thing to go collect data where other folks have collected data in the past. We like that recurring year after year data. But one of the things we're also looking for is gap filling. If there's an area that you know floods, but there's no data there historically since 2017, we would love to see data be collected there. And so this is a really great resource to use. We also have linked on this page locality specific maps. These are in the process of being updated. Most of them should look like this image that I've screenshotted on the right-hand side. A couple of them are still our 2022 maps, but I'm going to make sure I finish those before Catch the King this year. This goes into highly specific detail about where known publicly accessible flood locations are, whether it's a boat ramp, a park with wetlands access, and other areas like neighborhood floods and things like that, kind of that public knowledge that we've received of flooding. We've created specific locality maps for that as well. And I would highly recommend going into this site ahead of time over the next couple of weeks. Check these maps out, check the high tide predictions out to get a feel for what sorts of data you want to collect, and also making sure that these sites are at your level of comfort. So if you find this map, you want to map in Central Norfolk, and you go to Surrey Crescent and you're not really feeling like you can collect good data there, you can check out a different site. Or if you notice that maybe someone's installed a living shoreline in an area where it used to flood, then it's not a viable spot to collect that flood data. So going to sites ahead of time, checking out these resources ahead of time are really going to help you. So how will Catch the King work in general? Communicating with your regional team is a really good tip. So once we get you set up inside the Sea Level Rise app, you can hop on our Facebook group and communicate that way. There are messaging systems inside the Sea Level Rise app that you can use to communicate with teams as well. And those are called messages and updates, and we'll go over that in a little bit. Oh, good. I put screenshots in here of that. Nice. So inside a Catch the King region, there is a messages board here, and you can click this little plus button in the bottom right and actually send messages to the whole region and say, hey, I'm planning on mapping at this location. Anybody want to meet me there, etc. All sorts of ways you can use that. There's also the option to do this specific to the actual event. So not only can you message everybody who's joined that region, but the specific Catch the King event that we've developed. There's a little tab in there called updates with a very similar add a comment thing. So not only can you message people in the region as a whole, folks who may have joined the region to document flooding during a hurricane or some other event, but you can also communicate with folks who are in the Catch the King specific event. So how will it work day of? And I know, again, this is a lot of information to come in, and we'll have plenty of time to ask questions at the end. There are going to be 4 Catch the King stations set up in particular localities, one in Hampton, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, and Williamsburg. We'll have a little Catch the King banner in a tent, and in some locations, a tide captain will be there. Specific locations haven't been announced yet, but if you're like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what to do day of, and you just want to get started right on the day, you can visit one of these 4 stations if it's close enough to you, get a little bit more guidance, get some in-person hands-on. This is where you should go information. So we'll have those available, and I will announce those locations through our newsletter. Visiting the flood locations, again, like I mentioned earlier, you can use all the resources we've released to go check out some locations that you might like to document, and make sure that your GPS signal in those areas is above 70%. So inside the app, which is something, again, we'll go over in a minute, it has a GPS signal strength bar. And if you start collecting data with a signal less than 70%, your data pins can kind of go a little wonky, and we want to reduce that error as much as possible. You can map the location that you're using, or that you're mapping at using the Sea Level Rise app, dropping a pin about every 5 steps or so, and there's an option to both add a photo and add a note inside the Sea Level Rise app. So if you notice, say there is a significant amount of debris or trash in that particular location, that's something great to note. If you notice it's impeding travel, or it's an area kind of that a lot of people are taking or driving their cars through, that's also a great thing to note. And then taking additional kind of photos outside of the Sea Level Rise app, along with our contest that we're going to announce, is also a really great idea. So we say just add 1 photo inside the Sea Level Rise app, and any other photos you'd like to take, just use the camera app on your phone, and we'll give you a chance to submit those later on. And then I like to plug the volunteer appreciation event a couple times. Some tips and tricks: be patient with the Sea Level Rise app itself. Android phones can sometimes have a little bit of a slower connectivity to the data. Using the Discover tab, which we'll see in a minute, can load a lot of data at once, and so it can be kind of slow to load those things. The app is still in development. It is not the most perfect tool in the world, but it is very effective when it's used correctly. So just be patient with it. If it's being a little funky for you, give it some time, give it a refresh, reach out to me if you're having any kind of insane issues with it, and we'll move on from there. Keep an eye on your GPS signal, again, above 70%, wearing waterproof shoes and mapping with a buddy. Don't climb on rocks in areas with like berms and living shorelines. We're not asking anybody to go out in dangerous locations or standing in the middle of floodwaters or anything like that. So just be safe and be aware of your surroundings at all times. Protecting your device from water, a little plastic baggie, if you have it, like a sandwich baggie, it works just fine. But if you're fancier and you have one of those really cool waterproof baggies, those are really awesome too. Inside the registration form at our Catch the King link is a liability and kind of assumption of risk form that we're not liable for if your phone drops in the floodwater. So be super careful and take precautions to make sure your phone doesn't slip. Don't trespass. So we ask that everybody go to a public location, like a boat ramp or a park, unless you have explicit permission from the owner to document flooding on the property. So in some cases, in residential communities, folks who live directly on the coast and have flooding in their backyards, if you know them, they're your neighbor, you know their yard floods, make sure you ask them first before you go walking on their backyard. Same with other privately owned businesses and parking lots and things like that. And that's why it's a good idea to go scope out your locations ahead of time, make sure that they're publicly accessible, and ask for permission first. Expect things to change as well. Our tidal cycles are fairly predictable, and it's something that we can generally rely on, but you never do know. We might have clear skies today and terrible torrential rain during Catch the King weekend. So just be prepared for things to change. I certainly can't control the tidal cycles, but just expect things to maybe look a little bit different on the day than you might predict. So at this point, and I'm going to check one more time, I don't think Derek is back with us yet. So we're actually going to go step by step using the tutorial guide and the Sea Level Rise app. How I'm going to do this is I'm going to kind of work step by step using the tutorial guide. And once we complete a step, if everybody could use the raise hand function, and you can find that And actually, Karen, do you mind mentioning how to find that? Because my screen looks a lot different from y'all's in the moment while I'm presenting.
Sorry, I was just looking for the raise hand function as well.
Ah, Derek's
I'm
back.
back. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's perfect. Yes, so if you we'll return to doing step by step in the sea level rise app in a bit. I'm going to switch it over to Derek if you're ready. Derek, do you have?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, let me see if I can get this switched on.
Great. So everybody look for that raise hand function. In the meantime, you can go ahead and practice it and give it a shot. Just know that once you raise your hand, you actually have to press it again to lower your hand. So give it a shot and then press it again to bring it back down. But we will use that function when we're going step by step.
Awesome. All right.
Okay, I'm going to stop my share, Derek, and
Perfect.
you should have access.
Yep. Is my screen being shared yet?
Not yet.
Weird. Okay. Should be going through. No. Okay.
Yep.
Turn it
Got
off. It back on again for screen sharing. I don't know why it didn't go through the first time. Well, thank you so much for providing that background for us, Gabby. Basically, as kind of more or less the science liaison for the last 6 years or so, this is our 7th year, I guess, with Catch the King since 2017. We collected a lot of data with GPS flood mapping. So I'm a research professor at the Center for Coastal Resources Management at the Virginia Institute of Marine Science. And what we do with your data is essentially we use it to validate a flood forecast model called the Tidewatch Map. How it works is it basically ingests atmospheric forecast data from the National Weather Service at 3-kilometer spatial resolution and 1-hour temporal resolution for basically a 36-hour forecast looking into the future. And what's kind of fun about that, of course, is that, theoretically, like the National Weather Service can forecast for periods longer in advance. But as you may have realized, it's kind of a little bit dicey in terms of precipitation and other things that kind of create anomalous weather effects that compound on top of storm tide. So this map is basically generated twice daily at noon and midnight, and it does this essentially at 1 meter resolution in many places throughout the state. In other areas that are more rural, you'll see this is approximately 3 meter resolution based on the highest resolution LiDAR-derived digital elevation models. So what those are is essentially using aerial survey data collected by airplanes and satellites using light detection and ranging, or lasers, basically bouncing them off the landform to give us our highest resolution representation of topography throughout the Commonwealth. We're focusing on the coastal zone with this, as it's a coastal storm tide model. So as it updates at noon and midnight, you can see, cascading 36-hour forecasts looking forward. This is the model that you are essentially validating when you collect your data through Catch the King. So these 36-hour forecasts, they take about 1.5 hours roughly to run, sometimes 1.25, depending on what areas are flooded within the Commonwealth. And this is driven by a storm tide model called SCISM. So it's hydrodynamically linked, meaning it's solving physics shallow water equations to figure out restorative forces like friction through intertidal wetlands, along with areas that are more urban in locality. And so those static coefficients for friction are solved and calculated. So this is beyond just a spatial topographic model that's just looking at this from the bathtub perspective, saying, well, okay, if the water level is like 3.5 feet at Sewell's Point in Norfolk, then that must mean everywhere that's the elevation of 3.5 feet within a 1 mile radius of that area are likely to also be inundated at the same space. That's not what this model is doing. In this case, it is calculating the physics influences of wind direction, wind speed, and of course, tidal driven fluctuations, as well as, of course, the astronomical high tide of the year that we call the king tide is in fact a tidal influence. You can also just type in your address into this map. You could scan that QR code there at the bottom. It's in the forecast section of the website called AdaptVA. Either .com or .org will land you in the same spot, but essentially it'll allow you to look at your property along with roadways that you may need to access, especially in rural localities. This can be particularly useful. It's not intended for you to use this for navigation by boat or by roadway, but people do end up using it to help kind of make some informed management decisions pertaining to their assets. People will move tractors out of fields where they normally have them parked. People will move vehicles that are street parked on the roadways based on forecasts from these types of models. Even though it's not exactly what it's designed to do. In this case, these hydrodynamic models are updated every 12 hours for overlapping 36-hour periods looking forward. And this is where you can access these models developed at the Center for Coastal Resources Management, just through the adaptva.org or scanning that QR code there in the bottom right or bottom left-hand corner of the screen. So now that you know a little bit more about the models that we're validating using the data that you're collecting through GPS inputs, I'm going to talk a little bit about, well, how do we do that in the first place? As a lot of people are kind of confused as to, how do you take a mobile phone app and collect that as data and then translate that into digital models that can be used to verify maximum flooding extents? Well, dating back as early as this example from 2015 for these areas of the Larchmont neighborhood in Norfolk, essentially we take those points from the Sea Level Rise app. This is an example of the iPad interface, but you could be using any form of mobile device that has GPS connection with enhanced GPS preferably will allow you to basically turn these into points that can be translated to a geographic information system. And in this case, these are time-stamped points, so we know when they were collected, and we convert those into a contour that we then can kind of go across this line and basically compare each of the points along that line with the maximum flood extents that are predicted by our model. And each of those individual points are essentially distilled into a single metric for every site that is mapped throughout Catch the King, but also during just any tropical storm events like these examples that you may have seen the last couple of weekends. When we've had storms come through like Adalia, people will collect data and we're able to help verify our model further beyond just the core ask of Catch the King, which kind of serves as a dress rehearsal for the highest astronomical tide of the year. In this case, is distilled into kind of what we call a mean horizontal distance deviation, which basically says from each of the points collected by our volunteers through Catch the King, through the Sea Level Rise app developed by Wetlands Washington Cursive, it takes that information, compares each point with the nearest flooded area using cell center points of our model. So in this case, this is an older version of our model that was plotting this at 5-meter resolution. We're down to 3-meter resolution in rural localities and 1-meter resolution in urban localities. And then we compare them with the timestamps of your data. So this is an excerpt from a paper that I published in 2022 that was kind of looking at individual time indices and saying, well, based on this other area in the city of Norfolk that frequently floods all the way up to Hampton Boulevard, you can take each of the timestamps of these points and compare them with specific time indices of our model. Since it's not just plotting every 36 hours what the maximum tidal flooding extent will be, it's plotting individual tidal flooding extents every hour. And so taking that information, we then plot those on a map for Catch the King annually, but also during some of these antecedent flood events that we'll see, we compare them with our nearest water level sensor measurements, regardless of whether those sensors are maintained by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration or the U.S. Geological Survey, or even within the StormSense program through municipal governments. For example, the city of Norfolk has several sensors that we ingest directly into this that help us validate our model, but your data also help us kind of figure out whether or not our model has missed the mark or whether it's accurate in each of these places. As you can see, people were able to verify during Catch the King exactly where these areas were flooded during the Hague or during the highest astronomical tide of the year in the Hague and Norfolk. And so that's kind of also useful from our perspectives. We can use it to validate our models, but also it keeps us honest through this process as people can very clearly do their own comparison and see, well, did the model do a good job of accurately measuring these things? Last thing that I mentioned is that it is time dependent again. So as you're kind of looking through these numbers from 8 to 9 a.m., for example, or all the timestamps in this same area, or then people came back maybe an hour later and different users mapped the same space. Sometimes people will ask, like, am I just wasting my time? Has somebody already mapped this area? Well, no, not really, because the shape of the flood does slightly differ between these two, hour-long blocks based on the data collected by our model. And this is true not just for these areas of Norfolk that you're seeing here near the Haven Creek boat ramp in the Larchmont neighborhood previously, but these areas of Virginia Beach as well. And so as you kind of go through, we're basically producing these maps and doing internal comparisons every time that we have some significant flood event where you folks have been kind enough to collect data to help us better on our understanding of flooding. So to kind of give you an idea of what this looks like, during the inaugural year of Catch the King back in 2017, this is kind of a time lapse of what all the data looked like. That was our year that we collected the most GPS flood model data. And so, and I say flood model data because we collected so much data that year that it could actually be its own data-driven model by itself. If you've got enough GPS data points and they're scattered enough around, you can actually use this information to become its own model by itself. And so that's kind of been interesting to see as we take the topographic suggestions based on the data that are collected by our avid volunteers, that it's allowed us to build these models. And so over time, as we collect data, as you know, sea level rise is a very slow process, but we now have, since 2014, nearly a decade's worth of data from the Sea Level Rise app. And since Catch the King in 2017, we have significant quantities of data. To date, so far, I think I reported at our last event last year, after our 6th Catch the King in January, we had crossed the threshold of collecting cumulatively over 250,000 GPS high water marks using the Sea Level Rise app just in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so that's really exciting information, mostly because we've got a very significant catalog of information to derive outputs of kind of saying, well, if your local municipal governments are saying, well, we don't really have a lot of proof that sea level rise is happening, well, this is now kind of executing some of those executive orders that have been passed by our governor in the past, but also some of the more recent legislation as well to say, hey, well, if there's existing information suggesting that there's inundation happening in your area, well, it's not just suggestion or your pictures. You've now got GPS footprints that show exactly what the flooding extent was in 2018 and 2020 and 2023 as you collect data during Catch the King this year. And for our efforts in our inaugural year back in 2017, we collected 59,718 high water marks during the highest astronomical tide of the year throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia, shown here in this map, primarily in the southeastern sections along with the Middle Peninsula. But since then, we've been privileged to be able to expand to the northern neck and get a little bit more participation on the eastern shore, although we've had a little bit less participation in those areas just due to the lack of strength for cell phone signal. But it is still helpful regardless if you're able to collect data in these areas, because it kind of provides a more holistic perspective of exactly what's happening everywhere within the Commonwealth, both in urban and rural localities. And so with this information, we've learned a lot over time, and we're thrilled to figure out what we're going to learn more in the future using these data-derived insights. So at this time, does anyone have any questions for me pertaining to how our data are being used for Catch the King, along with data collected through the Sea Level Rise app during just year-round tidal flooding events?
I think we'll hold questions for the end, Derek, and I will do a quick little Sea Level Rise app training. But if you have a good question for Derek, make sure you guys write it down, because
you can put it in the chat and I'll answer it at the end. Yeah,
that works too. Yeah. Thanks, Derek. Thank you so much. Hopefully that gives everybody a little idea of why this data is important, where it's going. It is just really a fantastic event that we can take all sorts of places. And as Derek said, we're learning more about it year after year. The more data we collect, the more people we get involved in this effort, the more kind of avenues and pathways for the data we find. So with that, we're going to jump back into working through the Sea Level Rise app. And what I'm going to do is also show everybody, I believe this is the screen I want to share. Show everybody the tutorial guides, but also a very quick showing of this is wetlandswatch.org/Catch the King. This is where you'll find your big registration link, subscription to our Catch the King newsletter. And then you'll find all sorts of things like our tidal flooding calendar, that volunteer program sheet, kind of a background on what it means to be a volunteer. And then our tutorial guides are linked right down here as well. So we're going to go through this photo one. And if you remember, hopefully everybody has found the raise hand button. So what we're going to do, and we're going to give this a test run. Everybody who has downloaded the Sea Level Rise app, go ahead and tap that raise hand button. And if you're not going to do it today, that's all right. I just want to make sure everybody who wants to do it has done it. Okay, can anybody not find the raise hand button? Sometimes I really just lose it. I'm like, where did they put it? Great. Okay, so you can go ahead and lower your hands. Thank you very much. That was perfect. So most everybody should have the app. If you have downloaded the app for the first time and opened it, you'll notice that it asks for a registration form. And that asks you for your email and a password and a couple other bits of information. Who all has registered for the app and gone through that form? Go ahead and raise your hand. Oh, I love this. This is so cool. Okay, great. If you have just recently registered for the Sea Level Rise app, like today, go ahead and lower your hands. One thing that you should check for is in either your inbox of the email that you use to sign up, or sometimes it ends up in your spam inbox. You should find a verification link from Sea Rising Solutions. So in order for you to log into the app for the first time, you actually have to find that email that was sent to the same email that was sent to your inbox, and tap through that verification link. In some cases, it'll pop up with like a little error window right on the second that you open it. I'm not sure if Safari is just weird with this link. So don't be alarmed. As long as you click that link, you should be good to go. And then you can go back into the Sea Level Rise app and log in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go quiet for just a second. Could everybody who is successful in logging in for the first time and sees a screen that says just no regions found on the home page, could you go ahead and raise your hand if you were successful in logging in for the first time? Couple folks. Okay. Logged in, have a blank screen. Okay, seeing no regions found is exactly what you want to see. That is perfectly fine, Shannon. Thank you. Pamela, when you say not working on Android phone, what step are you hitched at? You can either type it or come off of mute.
Well, it may have come through because I got to no region found, and I thought that was a rejection.
No regions found. I know it's kind of jarring at first. That is the right screen to see, I promise.
Okay.
Thank you for that. All right, so I'm going to continue to kind of roll on in this fashion. For anybody who is not doing Sea Level Rise app stuff today, feel free to reach out to me in the future, or you can visit either through this Catch the King website up at the top, or you can type in app FAQs up here, or click this little link on the left-hand side. We have several training events available. So if you don't want to do it today, you can come to one of these in person. And some of them are Virginia Beach, Newport News, Williamsburg, Norfolk. And then of course, today's virtual session to get a little bit more hands-on material. Or if you're like, nah, I got this, I'll look at the tutorial guides later. That's perfectly fine too. Again, all of those are available both on the main Catch the King registration website and this app FAQs page if you scroll down a little bit more. And this is what that site looks like. So we have the written and photo guides. There are a couple videos that show you on how to get into this. This is where that NOAA tide prediction instructions live. And this was a screenshot I took earlier. Anyway, that is just a wonderful, wonderful resource for you guys to check out. So for all the folks who are seeing no regions found, we're going to move on to this next step. So you're going to go ahead and tap the Discover tab. And there's 4 tabs at the bottom, and this should be the second one in that list. If you have an Android phone, sometimes this map takes a little bit of time to load. And as you're kind of zooming in and out and exploring the map, it can be a little wonky. So what you're going to do is just use 2 of your fingers to pinch out. If you pinch them together on the Discover tab, it'll zoom you out. Find the general area where you're planning on collecting data and look for one of these little green pins that pop up. You should have the official filter turned on, and you'll know it's turned on if it's turned blue. So this is all of our official Catch the King regions. And what you're going to do is find that green pin in a locality near you. For those who are on the Northern Neck or the Middle Peninsula, these can be a little hard to find. The Northern Neck one, I believe, is around the Warsaw area, and the Middle Peninsula one is around Gloucester Point. So they can take a little bit of time, but just explore the Discover tab, find the one closest to you, and go ahead and tap it. Sometimes you have to tap it very lightly to get it to work. And again, this is where I encourage patience with the Sea Level Rise app. Once you do these couple of steps, you are good to go, and we will just move on from there. So find that region, tap the pin, and you'll see this little white text box pop up, and you're going to go ahead and tap that white text box. Could you raise your hand when you've made it to this 3rd screen? This is the hardest part because the Discover tab can be really janky sometimes.
And Gabby, if you don't mind, if I interject here, for those of you who are not able to follow along virtually, that's okay. This is really hard to do virtually.
Yes.
So if you're finding that this is just not working, if you don't worry, and just we're going to walk through it this way, and we can always come back and follow up with you later, especially those of you on the Middle Peninsula or the Northern Neck. We can offer some more hands-on training as well.
Yes, thank you, Karen. Yes, I know this part is going to be difficult. These first couple steps can be a real pain in the butt. Once you are in your region, you are pretty much set to go. So if you can help me over this hurdle, you're good to go. Or as Karen said, we have training events. You can always reach out to me separately and we can work out a time to meet, or you can work with a tide captain and we'll give you resources to connect that way.
Okay, I'm not getting any pins. How do you get the pins to show up?
So where are you located on the map?
Virginia Beach, just south of Little Creek, near Thorogood.
Okay, and you have an Android or an Apple?
An Apple.
Apple,
It's not
okay.
the same map, Gabby. It's not the same map that you showed with all the pins on it.
As in this specific screenshot?
If she's talking about the map with all the pins on it that Derek was showing.
Oh, yeah. It should look something like this where the pins are a lot more sparse. The Virginia Beach pin, I believe,
And that was my next question, is how far out is that one?
Yep, that one is on the northern kind of edge of Virginia Beach. And I'll show you, oh, it might not work actually with the blur.
Okay, yeah, because I did get one pin show up on Shore Drive, but that's disappeared now.
Yeah, so it can take a little second. You got to kind of jiggle the app to get it to pop up, but that's the right region pin.
Oh, okay. So, but I'm not getting any in the region that I'm looking at.
Right. Yeah. So we have to assign the region, even though the pins are like kind of designated to a specific location, we have to assign the pin a specific location for it to pop up on the app. Unfortunately, this means that you kind of have to go looking for it like an egg hunt because we've assigned it a particular location. We can't do shape files that highlight like all of Virginia Beach. So that specific pin is the right one as long as it says CTK Virginia Beach when it pops up. And so when you tap the pin, when it does appear for you, and again, this can take a second. If the map is just being really wonky, just give your app a refresh where you like swipe up. If you have an Apple, you can swipe up from the bottom of your screen and just refresh that specific screen. Yes, thank you. Thank you to the folks adding more detail in the comments. Sometimes that's a little easier. So, and yeah, oh, it's actually on this first screenshot, that Virginia Beach pin. So tap that. Tap the white text box that appears and then tap join and it will pop up with another window with another join button. So just tap join twice. Let me know, go ahead and raise your hand if you've made it through to the joining a region part.
I am tapping the Virginia Beach pin and nothing is happening.
The text box can sometimes take a little bit of time. So I would pause on tapping the screen and give it a second and then just try it lightly again. If that's not working, give your app a refresh.
Okay, and where does it appear?
It should appear right above the pin, just like this second screenshot here. And it can really be a pain in the booty sometimes.
Oops. I had something pop up and then it disappeared again.
Yeah, it does that too. And it's just a pain in the butt. That's all I have. Okay, you guys can lower your hands. We're going to move on to the next step just in the interest of time, and then we'll circle back and anybody still having issues, we can work through that one by one. So once you've hit join, and go ahead again, press join and join. Each time you join a region, it has to go through approval. This is just how we kind of manage volunteers coming inside our official Catch the King regions. So once you've joined it, I've gone ahead and approved you through our Sea Rising Solutions portal. And that means you should now see that region appear on your My Regions tab. That's that bottom left tab. And it should appear as this little rectangular box. Can everybody raise their hands who sees the region they joined pop up in the My Regions tab? Getting there, we're getting there. Wonderful. I know some of our tide captains are on the call too, and you guys should already be golden. Great. So from there, you're going to tap the region and tap the mappings listing. This is where all of our events live. CTK Norfolk might look a little bit different than what you're seeing here. But that's okay. Just look for 2023 CTK and then whichever region you join. So in this case, I have screenshots from Norfolk, but if you're part of Middle Peninsula, you'll see Middle Peninsula pop up here, or Virginia Beach, et cetera, et cetera. So once you're inside the region and this mappings listing, tap that 2023 CTK event and hit this little blue button that says join. Can everybody raise their hands when they've made it to that part? Gotcha, Shannon. I see you in there now. Perfect.
Yeah, I'm completely lost. I have no idea what
You
I'm
got it.
doing.
Nope, you're okay. So you should see, if you go back to your My Regions tab in the bottom left, you should see CTK Virginia
okay,
Beach
okay,
now.
okay. Yeah, that's the stuff. Okay.
Yep, you're all caught up then. And you'll go to you'll tap that and go to mappings at the top and find 2023 CTK Virginia Beach.
Gabby, just to make sure that I'm in the right place.
Yeah.
Are there 26 followers of 2023 CTK Norfolk?
Let me check.
Oops.
2023 CTK Norfolk. That is correct. 26 followers.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. All
Okay,
right.
Okay. I'm sorry.
You
Do you
got
want
it.
training CTK for Virginia Beach, or what runs for 2023 CTK Virginia Beach?
Scroll a little further and you should see 2023 CTK Virginia Beach.
Got
Should
it.
start with 2023. That's
Got
the one you want to join. Sweet. So, okay, everybody can put their hands down. Thank you so much. I know the step-by-step is grueling, but I appreciate you taking the time. So that's kind of it for joining a region and event. So once you have access to this mappings listing inside your region, this is where we'll post events for other things like hurricanes that pop up, like Derek mentioned earlier, Hurricane Idalia, we put something out, and Hurricane Lee, we also did something, or if we see just kind of that nor'easter wind driven flooding, we'll put an event out for that. You'll join it just the same way, and that's how it populates in your tools tab and how it organizes your data collection. So anytime you want to map inside a particular event, you'll just tap it from the mapping screen and press join. After all of that, and go ahead and lower your hands, we'll move on to the next stage. On Catch the King Day, so you'll notice that a lot of these events have a little calendar icon to the left of them. That's the day that those events start. So for instance, Catch the King starts on October 27th. A couple regions, you may notice it starts a little bit earlier. We're accommodating to some student schedules. So I think Virginia Beach and Chesapeake and maybe one other start on October 26th. That's just for students. You can also go out and map on the 26th if you would like, but we're just doing that to help our students out. Once the event starts, so wherever that calendar date says that it starts, it will populate here in this drop down box on your tools tab, and the tools tab is in the bottom right of your phone, and you may have to press the back button in the top left to back all the way out to view these 4 tabs again. But you should see the tools tab in the bottom right. Can you raise your hand if you can find the tools tab? Sweet. Again, you may have to, if you're on like the Discover tab or inside the mappings listing, you'll have to back out a couple pages to find the tools tab. Awesome. Looks like a ton of people are there. If you'd like to see how this pops up on the day, you can go ahead and join something like the training region, which is open through like November something. And you can join it the same way you joined 2023 CTK Norfolk. And it will populate in your tools tab under this drop-down box because it's already open. But Catch the King will not until at least October 26th, in some cases October 27th. So on Catch the King Day, you go out, you get in your car, you drive to your flood location a little bit close to high tide, and you open your Sea Level Rise app. This is the tab you're coming to, is this tools tab. You'll select 2023 CTK, whatever your region is, from this little drop-down box. Again, you're not going to see anything there unless you're part of an event that's currently open. And this is where the rest of your data collection lives. So you're going to keep an eye on that GPS signal strength bar. This is something you should be able to see right now on your phone. And you want to make sure that it stays above 70%. If you're a real go-getter, 70% is still kind of iffy. So if you aren't really sure that the data you're going to collect is going to be confident, you can move locations, find a different spot. And again, that's why we encourage you to go early and check out those locations ahead of time. So this will fluctuate based on your signal strength. You'll see there's 2 additional buttons, add an optional note and capture a photo. We ask that you just capture a photo once at the end of your mapping. So say you map a whole shoreline, you can turn around, hit the capture photo button and take a photo of everything you just did. Same thing in any other location. And that will upload there. And you can only do this if you gave the app permission to access your photos right at the beginning when you registered. So if you didn't give it access, you won't be able to capture photos. And that's fine. You can take photos just on the camera roll or the camera app on your phone and send them later. Can we make sure Oh, Josie, I think you've got a little feedback going on. There we go. Cool. So yeah, so you can capture a photo. Again, you can add an optional note here. That's where you want to mention things like if there's any debris in the water, etc. And this drop pin button is your main tool. So every 5 steps or so around the edge of a water line, you're going to hit that drop pin button, and that's how it's going to collect. Each pin you drop is going to populate in this window up at the top as a little red pin. So you can know you've successfully dropped a pin if it pops up here. So in this case, this person did a whole mapping here and each one of those pins shows up for them. Is everybody okay with that? Raise your hand if you're good on the tools tab. If it all makes sense or a little bit of sense. Great. Oh, wonderful. Okay, good. Go ahead and raise your hands or lower your hands. Thanks, guys. So again, that's your main data collection tool. That's where you're going to open on Catch the King Day, whichever day you end up going out. If you go on multiple days, you'll return to this tools tab and go from there. That drop pin button is your best friend. Again, capturing a photo, adding a note, and these are, again, tutorial guides that exist for you. If you like the way that this is formatted and you want to kind of return to how to do things, this is available to you. At the end of your data collection, you want to make sure you hit the Save Data button at the bottom. This is what makes sure all of your data gets uploaded to our web portal. So not only is it important to select the event, drop your pins, add a photo and a note, but at the very, very end, press that red Save Data button, and that will complete your mapping. Some phones have experience when they hit this button, it'll actually close their app out entirely. That should be okay. If that happens to you, just let me know on the day. I'll send out a feedback survey just to make sure our app was functioning all right for most folks. So if that happens to you, just document it and let me know what happened. But for the most part, this should just bring you back out to your My Regions page. Awesome. The other function that you can use in the app, and I'm going to be really quick here so that we have at least 15 minutes for y'all to ask questions, is this trouble spots function. Say you want to participate in Catch the King, but you might not have time to map an entire location, or you know of a flood area that's not very accessible by foot. You can actually come to the trouble spots tab and drop a single pin. It just pops up with a little description box and you can say, hey, it floods here. This is something that we use for Catch the King in putting our maps together. It's somewhere that we can send volunteers to out in the future if you don't have time to map the full location, or it's just gives us a frame of reference for locations that might be inaccessible but do frequently flood. So if you can't conduct a whole mapping for any which reason, feel free to use the trouble spots tab. You'll press that little plus button that pops up in the bottom right. It comes up with a comment box. Give a little description on the location you're at and press save, and it will populate with this little pin here. So that's just an option for you guys. Again, now that you're kind of inside the Sea Level Rise app, you can actually see some of the places where you can communicate with other volunteers. So at the region level, if you go from your My Regions tab and just tap into the region you joined, you'll see messages at the top, and that's where you can add a note and communicate with everybody inside the region. If you tap inside the event, so for instance, the 2023 CTK event you joined, you'll also see an updates tab, and you can update folks who have joined that or the event specifically. Is everybody good on the messaging pieces of the app? I guess you can raise your hand if you're good on that. This is also when we send out the information, region by region, like website pages through Wetlands Watch. I'll kind of build this out again and give you some instructions on how to communicate with folks if you would like to. Again, it's not required that you get into a team or a group of folks, but if you are interested in that, we can help you figure it out. There is a training region available. So if you're someone who wants to play around with the app, but is scared to collect data in any of our official kind of Catch the King spaces, there's a training region that hovers in the Norfolk area. It's just south of where Norfolk appears on the Discover tab. We have events made in here for you to join where you can just drop random data pins like in your house, so that we know that's not official Catch the King data, but it's just giving you a chance to kind of practice with the app. So feel free to join that or join one of the training events inside the region that you joined to kind of play around. So that's an option to you too. And that's it for the Sea Level Rise app. I'm going to be quiet now and everybody can go ahead and lower their hands. If you have any questions at all about the Sea Level Rise app, about how Catch the King works, or if you have any questions for Derek about the data collection, now's your chance. Feel free to either come off of mute or just type it in the chat. It's perfectly fine.
You open for questions?
I'm not getting the Norfolk 2023. I just have something that says Norfolk in general and has 529 people attending it. That's the region that's coming up for me.
Okay, and you're seeing when you tap the region from your My Regions tab?
Yes, I'm just seeing CTK Norfolk, that one on the left, far left. And when I touch that, I don't get anything. And I don't know if it's because my app is old. I don't know.
Nope, you should be okay. So what you might want to do is refresh the app, because sometimes if you're chilling in the app after you've joined a region, once I approve you to it, it can take a second for the app to be like, oh, hey, I'm approved now. I have access to all of these other things. So if you're able to refresh the app, I would try that. And then
How
go
do I
back
refresh
into
it? How do I
you said you have an iPhone, right?
Yes.
So if you swipe up from the bottom of your screen, just press and oops, sometimes it takes a second.
It just
Swipe up from the bottom and it should pop up with windows of all the apps that you have open. Looks like this.
Yes.
Go ahead and swipe up on the Sea Level Rise app one, and that just gives it a refresh.
That closes it. I'm swiping it up,
Yes.
and that closes it.
Yep.
And then I go back.
Yep.
And
Tap it back into it.
Then when I open it up back in, I'm going to my regions, and I've got the same screen I had before with CTK Norfolk, and it says 522 followers. This region is to support King Tide, but I'm not getting anything like anybody else seems to have.
Do you see
you have to tap on the mappings tab at the top. See how the word mappings is circled on the screen on the slide?
Yes.
Yep,
Let me
there
go
should
back
be
one.
4 tabs at the top. Thanks everybody. And if you have to leave now, that is perfectly fine. Thanks to everybody who came. Hopefully we'll have
I don't have anything that says mapping.
I've noticed that in some cases, if your phone text, like is your text size large? Like when you set your settings on your phone, is all the text like really big?
I don't think so.
Okay, I was gonna say sometimes it can really crowd the tabs at the top.
I've got one that's got Norfolk, Virginia, and just has people. Then I have one that's 2019 King Tide Norfolk. Then I have Norfolk King Tide again, 2019. That one has the crown. I measure the muck, which I just uploaded accidentally. And then I have CTK Norfolk. I touch CTK Norfolk. I don't have anything that says anything about mappings. I've seen the screen. There's nothing about it. And I just wonder.
Does the CTK Norfolk region have the crown in the profile picture on your My Regions page?
It has a crown. It does have a crown. I shared it. I thought I shared it to everybody a few minutes ago.
Oh, did you take a screenshot of it?
I'll take a picture of the screen and share it again.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. That's interesting. Your name is not coming up on here. Is this,
You know,
this is still Shannon, right? Oops.
this is Josie.
Oh, Josie. Okay, hold on.
Let's see. I'm sending photos of what my screens look like.
Okay.
And
this is, for anybody wondering, this is exactly
one.
how our training sessions usually go. It's like a one-on-one, help folks out who are having issues with the
I feel
app.
like every year that I've tried to do this, I've had issues. I think I only had one successful year, and that was
Oh, I'm
2019.
so sorry.
So
Yeah,
here's the two screens.
Interesting. Because it says I have approved you. What you might want to try is go ahead and unjoin or hit cancel request and
Okay.
try it one more time and let me see if it comes through.
Okay.
In the meantime, I'm going to address a couple other questions. So Hillary, I saw you asked, in order to get more training on the app, do we have to go physically to a specific training location? That's what we have available right now, are these in-person training sessions. If you would like just a one-on-one, like quick Zoom call with myself, feel free to just reach out to my email and I'll pull that the slides back up so you can have my email on the screen. Feel free to just reach out to me. We can hop on a call and I can walk you step by step. Or if you live local to Hampton Roads, we can meet up in person over coffee, whatever might help. And we can also connect you with tide captains. So hopefully
I have a general question from the Eastern Shore.
Go ahead.
All right. How much of this relies on the strength of your cell signal? We have regions, and particularly right here at my house, excellent GPS, almost no cell signal whatsoever. How does that affect the app?
Cell signal, I think, does have quite an influence on your data collection. I would, in your case, go out maybe and try to join one of the training events. So inside the CTK Eastern Shore region, there should be, under mappings, there should be one that says training. You can go ahead and join that one and it will populate in your tools tab. Just right now, I believe it's open. Try dropping a pin, and if it drops accurately, you should be okay. Like if you're dropping it and that pin is appearing right where you are and your GPS signal is strong, you should be okay. But cell signal does have an influence on how good that data is, but you can tell in your tools tab while you're collecting those pins.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, Eastern Shore is somewhere we're actually kind of hoping to spotlight in future years. I have a couple folks who have been interested. The Nature Conservancy has reached out with interest in collecting data over there. So I think in the future, we're going to try to get some of those mobile hotspots like the Verizon MiFis out there to see if it helps boost the signal a little bit, so we can really collect data in places like Oyster and Washapreeg and things like that that kind of struggle with cell signal a little bit. But that's absolutely something I'm taking feedback on as well to see how we can really get some data up there. So thanks for your question. For those in Virginia Beach, Joe dropped in the chat. Joe is our tide captain in Virginia Beach. Thank you so much, Joe. He has a couple training events available. Those are listed on our app FAQ pages. So feel free to reach out to him or sign up for those training events if you need some on the ground practice. And then I'm scrolling back through. Derek, looks like you have a question from Jacob that says, do you consider wind-driven water events like the very high storm tide inside the Lesnar Bridge around September 23rd? The tide was around Lynn Haven boat ramp and was as high as I've ever seen it.
Yes. So as a storm tide model, its main considerations are wind-driven estuarine circulation, along with, of course, tidal-driven circulation. So basically, wind and tides are definitely affected. In this case, the model is mainly dealing with those two primary driving forces. At this time, the Tide Watch map is not currently considering rainfall-driven inundation, but that is one of the things that we are working to add in the next couple of years. mostly working with more highly resolved rainfall inputs from the National Weather Service is kind of the primary thing that we need. But then also when you add rainfall, you have to be able to balance it with groundwater infiltration for going out through the bottom of the digital representation of our coastal floodplains. So yes, it covers wind, like that area near the Lesnar Bridge and the inn there, along with the boat ramps that kind of lean up there. It's a pretty famously, famously well-known spot that floods in that area, especially given the proper wind directions. But wind direction and wind speed, along with friction and restorative forces as it passes up over the pavement in those areas, are all considered with our physics-based hydrodynamic model that drives our tide watch map.
Question for Derek.
Yep.
Over on the Eastern Shore, pretty close to the Eastern Shore Lab, are they taking any? Are they involved in this? Are they available for training? What's going on over at the lab?
So you're talking about the VIMS Eastern Shore Lab up near Watchel Creek?
Absolutely.
Okay. So there are folks that have collected data over there before, but we have not run any training events all the way out there. But that may be something to consider if there's significant interest for us to potentially send someone out there to do it. I know that people do, collect data, and there's a water level sensor there at Wachapreek as well that NOAA maintains. So we do have data that's being collected out there by volunteers in past years, along with, of course, a long-term water level sensor that's positioned there as well.
Derek, and we will try to recruit some more help from the VIMS staff over there at that lab. Right now, we do not, for the Gordons on the Eastern Shore, we don't currently have anybody at that lab with VIMS officially involved with this effort, but we can certainly try to recruit somebody.
How about the UVA lab?
At Oyster.
At Oyster.
I'm not sure how many people we've actually got registered for the Eastern Shore. I don't think we have anybody who's turned up yet. We've had some interest, Gabby, but not registered. Is that correct?
Yeah, very few. And actually we can see, I can pull up the app for anybody who's interested. Last year we had one volunteer actually collect data on the Eastern Shore. This year we were trying to get the Nature Conservancy in. They were actually going to focus on oyster specifically. They actually ran out of capacity this year. They're a small staff, and so we're looking. I mean, it's right now it's kind of folks who are interested in living out there, but it can be hard to bring this program out there. So we're obviously taking suggestions. And this is the data viewer that Derek has been sharing, and we've seen a couple screenshots of, will show you where data has been collected there in the past. And I hope my audio was okay through that. I saw myself glitching a little bit.
It was fine.
Okay, good. So yeah, a couple little, I'm actually going to zoom in on the 2022 data because I remember it being pretty darn good. Any other questions? Josie, did you get in okay?
I don't know if I did. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm going to send you a picture. I got into something and it gave me mappings finally, but there was nothing for October. It just shows, flooding week of 9/25/2023 and hurricane tropical storm flood events 2023. And they're all listed as September.
Okay, you can scroll down a little bit further inside the mappings tab. Does it let you scroll?
Yes, it does. And oh wait, you know what was confusing me? It was just below, they were going down. All the September ones were lowering in date, and then there was July 25th.
Yeah.
And below July 25th is October 27th. Yay.
Yeah. Yay. Okay, you got it.
And then October 26th.
We're going to work to archive a lot of the older events. Right now, the app's organization of the different events is just a little bit wonky. And again, this is where I just say, have patience with the sea level rise app. It's still in development. We're still taking all of this feedback and trying to work step by step with the developers on getting this perfect. But we are pretty far from perfect at the moment. But the good thing is that once you're in, go ahead and tap that event, that October 27th, and hit join, and it will pop up for you on your tools tab on October 27th. So you should be good to go.
Yay.
Yay. Thank you so much for bearing with us on that. I appreciate it. Anybody else who has joined a region who is not yet approved, I believe everybody in the comments or in the chat should be in by now. But any other questions, comments before we hop off? Cool. So one last kind of rally up. Again, I'll say if you haven't registered for Catch the King yet, please plug in your information on our registration form, wetlandswatch.org/catchtheking. I'll drop that link in the chat really quick for those who have not yet. I'm sure everybody on this call has probably done at least that so far. This is, again, I'm going to reach out kind of region by region, locality by locality, and get you guys specific resources and link your maps and things like that we've created. In the meantime, make sure you're subscribed to the Catch the King newsletter. Come to this website not only to register, but to view some of the information. Use this tab on the left-hand side to learn more about the sea level rise app. Go to the app FAQ page if you want to plan ahead and kind of check out some of those resources again. Find the tide prediction station map instructions, view the composite map with the tide watch forecast. And then this is where all those locality specific maps are linked. Again, lots of information to come. We have a couple weeks before Catch the King. Join in on one of those training events if you want some on the ground experience. And thank you all so very much for joining us today. If you need to follow up with me or want a one-on-one, reach out to my email. And I'll get back to you. We'll set up something fun. And thanks again for joining, and everybody may be free. Enjoy the rest of your evenings.
Thank you so much, Gabby.
Of course.
And Derek.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Derek and Karen, for helping me.
Thank you for posting those helpful links as we were both talking, Karen. That's always helpful. I was like, QR codes are sometimes never on the screen long enough for people to scan them, even though I try to stay on them for a few minutes. But even when I'm watching presentations, it'll be on the screen for 2 minutes, and I only think about it as soon as they change to the next slide. So awesome.
That's how it goes. I'll hang on for a couple more minutes just in case there's anybody who has lingering questions that doesn't want to ask the whole group. But for the most part, everybody's free to go. I will post a recording of this on our website and send it out in the newsletter. So if you missed the beginning, you'll be able to go back and see it and share the news far and wide.
Yeah,
Thanks again, everybody. Have a great night.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe. I appreciate your comments as well. It's always helpful when you steer people towards exactly where they need to find things in Virginia Beach.
Yes, thank you, Joe, for everything that you do.
Hey crew, this is Hayden Gordon over on the Eastern Shore, and I'm thinking what I'm finding is with not much cell signal, we're not going to do you much good. We're in Willis Wharf, which is an interesting region because it's heavily aquaculture. I actually worked for VIMS for over the 70s and did a lot of the mapping from a de Havilland beaver of the eelgrass and whatever. So, and we worked through the Eastern Shore lab, and I was working through NASA too, who did the photography. So we'd like to take part in this, and I think the area we're in Willis Wharf would be an interesting area for you. Given the fact we're not very populated, it doesn't happen to be a sensitive area because if we flood, it doesn't bother that many people, but it still does happen over here. So we'd like to take part in it, but what I think I'm finding, and Gabby, appreciate very much